So today we'll be talking about data privacy, DPTM versus CBPR. It's going to be a panel discussion with industry experts on data privacy. So first, I'll be the moderator for today. Our panelist, Navin. Navin has extensive experience from his work with GRC. He has led projects across various standards and sectors, such as financial institutions, the education sector, high-growth startups, and technology-based startups, ranging from data privacy assessments, cybersecurity assessments, and cybersecurity program management. Next, we have Dominic Ng. So Dominic Ng is part of IMDA's data protection certification team. He's passionate about helping organizations understand the importance and benefits of having robust data protection standards in the digital economy, and how data protection certifications can give businesses peace of mind and increase their competitive advantage both locally and internationally. So Dominic is a certified information privacy manager. And last but not least, we have Yut Ng. So Yut Ng is the Vice President, Strategies, Development and Digitization of Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. He's also the Managing Director of the Ventus Consultants Private Limited. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to start the panel discussion proper. Since it's now already 10:05, there's still people streaming in, but we'll go ahead with some of the lighter topics to start. So maybe to kick it off, let me just throw an arrow over to Navin, who's also from Riverside, before we get other speakers in also. So maybe to start, we can talk a bit about what are the privacy trends observed here in Singapore and kick it off from there.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Chang Heng, for this. Right, so coming from Riverside, which is a firm doing both security and privacy, just drawing the comparison between the two, we actually see that companies generally are more inclined to engage consultants, audits for cybersecurity, and less so for privacy. So that was the past. And why so? This is because in Singapore, actually PDPA is running on a complaint regime rather than an audit regime. So this means to say that if you're low profile, no one complains about you, chances are that nothing much might happen. And if we draw that in terms of the attitudes of the society, in Asia especially, relatively to our counterparts in, say, Europe or US, we'll find that in terms of the attitude towards privacy, in general, we are relatively less we place less importance towards that. So for example, we are actually more willing to compromise a bit on privacy to actually have, like, say, for example, more national security. So as a result, it tends to be the case whereby there has been a bit of prioritization and importance placed on security, and that's resulting to external factors such as compliance requirements, requests from suppliers. And data privacy at the start was a little bit deprioritized. However, I think these days we do actually see a gradual shift where companies are starting to prioritize privacy more. For example, we do see more and more organizations or clients actually reaching out for PDPA gap assessments or trying to find out how to get data protection trustmark. And this is a result of maybe a push from regulators. Almost 12 months back, there has been the amendment for a PDPA, whereby it's going to be much harsher for companies if they are found to be non-compliant. And also from the people itself, I think attitudes, there are currently higher user expectation for organizations to actually use data responsibly and safely. There will no doubt be the diffusion coming down from the countries like Europe, US down to Asia, even if there is that slight difference now. And finally, perhaps there is that push from your suppliers or from even if you are working with government initiated projects, there will be that push from government on businesses, because they really we can see that they might want to be driving privacy and DPTM forward. So one last point here is that in terms of some studies done by I think it was Cisco, and this was done on a global scale for countries all around Singapore, Asia, Europe. It found that actually what organizations felt is that customers will not actually buy from them if they feel that they are not adequately protecting their data, and that external privacy certifications are a factor in this buying process. So this response rate has been 90% or more. It's extremely high. So with that, actually, we see market forces coming into play in terms of actually getting the prioritization of data privacy compliance up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nevin. Now that we have set the stage somewhat, I saw Dominic smiling a bit at some of the points there. So I think it's something to say also. So let's open the floor to all the panelists, and we can get the conversation going. So to the points Nevin mentioned, right, around the attitudes from different regions of the world in terms of maturity of how people see data privacy as a right versus as more of a business requirement, as well the government efforts to regulate this. I think there are quite a few points there we can actually address and open to the panel.
Okay, great. Maybe I go first. Then first of all, thanks for having me here and great to be on this panel. Great to see you here as well from SB. Yeah, so hi. So Nervin just mentioned a few good points about the trend of data privacy in the world. In fact, it is now to say that data privacy previously was something that was not really placed in importance is true. But as digitalization is increasing, especially with COVID, right? Everything is happening. And with the whole digitalization comes this increase, this sudden like jolting awakening by organizations, by government agencies in general, that, hey, we need to protect this data that we are sharing. Okay, because of digitalization and increased collection and use of personal data, there's this awareness that yes, we need to keep pace with this rate of digitalization. And around the world, the whole privacy world is actually moving very rapidly. Singapore, we are trying to catch up, frankly. Okay, first and foremost, I'm not PDPC, so please don't quote me that whatever Dominic say, or this is a regulator standpoint. I'm not PDPC, so I don't speak on behalf of them. Okay, so this is just my own general observation. The privacy world is moving really very, very fast, and I wouldn't say that we were pretty late into the game, but 2012 when the PDPA was enacted, 2014 it came into force, and then we only had our first major act amendment last year, as Nevin pointed out correctly. And this is an attempt to align ourselves with global standards, right? And I must assure you, Singapore, we adopt a very different approach from a lot of other privacy laws in terms of regulatory approach. We are more business friendly. Right. Okay, let's take the comparison. Let's say we take the GDPR. GDPR, they focus a lot on human rights, right? So if you will read the GDPR, you will find out, you will hear things like right to be forgotten, right, erasure and all that, which you will not find in Singapore's PDPA. Because for us, we adopt a more business-friendly approach, not so much human rights. And because of that, when we align, we don't align wholesale. We don't copy the homework of other people, right? We take the homework and then we change the words a little bit. Okay, Rob, don't say that. No, don't quote me on that. Yeah, but that is our aim. We try to do what makes sense. We try to align ourselves to standards around the world to keep pace with the ever-changing landscape, privacy landscape. And the other point that Naveen raised was, yes, you will start to see an increased demand by companies, by even government agencies for a good demonstration of your compliance to the PDPA, not just the PDPA, but overall data protection accountability. And this is true because this is something that IMD, we are working very hard with government agencies, because at the end of the day, the easiest way for an organization to demonstrate that they comply with the PDPA, that they have good standards in place, will be through a third-party certification. That is the best way. Yeah, so it is true. It is increasing. Government tenders, especially if you're in the ICT industry, you'll start to see ICT procurement tenders from the government starting to ask for the data protection trust mark. Not as mandatory, encouraged, but slowly and surely it will be ramped up. Right. So yeah, that's my point. Maybe yeah, I thought you want to share some thoughts on this as well.
Oh, sorry, you're muted.
No problem. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for passing the mic to me, Dom. So I think from a SME perspective, I can't speak for everybody. I think generally, the SMEs as a business is actually typically lagging in terms of adoption of anything that's not core related to sales and business generation activities, right? And primarily because if you look at the growth of SMEs, not many actually make it into the more mature stage, which means that right at the beginning, SMEs are looking at how to survive, how to firefight, and how to make sure that they do the maximum with the minimum amount of resources. And many SMEs don't go beyond that because for various reasons, right? And sometimes when you get stuck in a certain way of operating, it's really hard to actually transform yourself out of that. And transformation has been what we've been trying to actually encourage SMEs to do. So it takes some mindset change, right? So when it comes to data privacy and data control, right, and the whole data protection world, most of the SMEs actually are more concerned about penalties. The big thing why SMEs really worry about privacy is because you really get fined, and now of course as it's gone one step further because the directors are liable, right? So SMEs are concerned. Now the challenge is that if you look at a typical world, no one is really gonna share with an SME how to assess your data protection scheme within your organization. You may have data sitting in different places, and because SMEs sometimes rely on transient labor, right? Temp staff and so on, data that they may end up in the machine, or it may end up somewhere. And if the SME doesn't manage that well, it will start leaking, right? So overall, I think audit is one perspective that people come in and say, okay, let's go for audit. Now, the challenge with the SME perspective about audits is that, they want to know where is it getting to, right? If you're giving me a series of steps on what I should ideally be following, then the SME will say, hey, I can't deal with ideals because you're going to tell me 20 things to do and actually only 3 applies to me. So I think the challenge is really how do you dumb it down to an SME perspective where it encourages adoption, and perhaps we can look at it from the other perspective where can you start off with 2 or 3 basic steps that we can say, hey, let's begin with these 2 3 basic steps. And then if you want to take it more, and then you take it beyond that if you are ready and capable of. And I think if we are doing certification and marks right around encouraging SMEs, I think we got to kind of allow that to kind of gradually step up, right? Maybe start with a bronze and then silver and then gold or platinum. And at the bronze level, what does it mean for you? So that's where I can come in to kind of get the ball rolling and warmed up.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Yuri. I just thought good to bring up one point is that you mentioned that in the Act Amendment, directors are liable, right? Actually, they are only liable if there's criminal intent. Yeah. So overall, ultimately, so this is something that a lot of people ask me, about since Act Amendment, if does it mean that DPO can be punished if they didn't do their job correctly or properly? The answer is no. Okay, the DPO will not be singled out as a scapegoat if they, for example, they encounter a data breach. It will still be an organizational-wide investigation. However, the DPO or whoever in the company, let's say they leak the data or whatever due to criminal intent, then yes, they can be prosecuted under the law.
That's a great news, because that's a little footnote that many may not have read.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct,
awesome
correct,
to know that. Yeah, then I think it allows for SMEs to be a bit more free in terms of assessing it from perspective of business lah, rather than
correct,
really being worried about their own.
correct.
Mm.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we want SMEs to be able to use data, right? Don't hold on to the data. Data is like it's a gold mine, you know. You hold on to it. If you don't use it for things like business analytics, understanding your customers, it's a waste. So actually, IMDA, PDPC IMDA, we do encourage SMEs to use data that they have to harness the power of data, and there are actually available tools out there. Just feel free to visit the IMDA website and the PDPC website to find out more. Yeah. So and I hear you about the this level of certifications, right? The bronze, silver, gold. In fact, we have taken this comments back and we have toyed around the idea of how we can help SMEs at least achieve a certain level of basic data protection before they advance to the more the more advanced certifications like the Trustmark certification. So all these things are in the conceptualization. I think you will hear more after the committee of supply this year. Okay, so just give a teaser here.
Okay.
So
That's what a lot of us who actually watch the budget are looking forward to, the COS, right?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
got that.
Okay, great.
Okay. Actually, I think that was a very good conversation. I think when Dominic, when you corrected that, there was a visible sigh of relief from everyone.
No, it's not a correction. It's not a correction. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, it's good that you pointed that out
I mean,
because
the
this has
clarification.
because this is a problem that people, especially DPOs so whenever they get appointed as a DPO, most of the time it's not a voluntary basis right. Correct me if I'm wrong so most companies, the directors will say, okay, mini mo. Okay, well, they don't do that, right? They will just choose the most capable person, most experienced person in privacy, and then assign them as a DPO. Yeah, so it's not voluntary. So a lot of DPOs, or potential DPOs, they are afraid, you see. Say, like, oh, wow, with the Act Amendment, will I get prosecuted if I screw up? No, don't worry. Don't worry. Do your best. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, but from that point also, that there's this conversation surrounding can we outsource this DPO service, right? And then also the thing to note for audiences is that even if you outsource your DPO function, the responsibility will still lie back on organization if things goes wrong, right?
Correct.
And
Yes.
then there's the benefits, pros and cons to whether you should do that outsourcing of DPO. I think you mentioned about SME having the resource, making the most of the list. So, but perhaps many SMEs also, if they do not have that resource to have a specialist in data privacy, it might be good to first consider that outsourcing of DPO. But the responsibility will still lie back on management. And then once you are able to get that expertise, that competence, the knowledge transfer between the vendor and your company, then maybe you can consider, okay, maybe I develop in-house. I think that's also a consideration there.
I think one point that I understood across all three panelists just now was around how the data privacy approach right now is very heavily regulatory based. It doesn't, I mean, a regulatory based standard doesn't always provide people with the best roadmap to how you can get there. Like what is considered you are there now, and then breaking it down to bronze, silver, gold does help that in the sense that okay, it helps you understand where your maturity is. So I think this is actually a very good opening to touching a bit on data privacy certifications. So in the sense that the certification might not be the end goal, the process of reaching there, even if you don't get yourself registered and certified at the end, actually does give you some sort of a roadmap. Although, admittedly, as an industry, some of these certifications might be a bit too structured, a bit too in-depth for the average SME, although there might be some strategies around that and resources, especially around what ASME can help them with. So we'll touch on that again later on also. But for now, maybe it'd be a good topic to go into around some of these certification programs that are out there. And I guess perhaps Dominic, if you could kick this portion off.
Okay, great. I do have a deck of slide. Okay, it's actually just one slide, just to facilitate the conversation. Let me just pull this up. Okay, right. So I'm. Wait, sorry. I always have this problem. Yeah. So give me a second first, because I'm trying to do a full screen. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not a very good Teams user. Yeah, so just give me a second to share this screen first. I'm so used to Zoom. Okay. All right. Okay, I see the little red box here surrounding my slides. I assume that everybody can see.
Can see your
Okay,
screen.
you're right. Yeah, so in terms of data protection certifications, there are countless certifications out there in the world, okay, that has to do with data privacy, data protection. Specifically for Singapore, we are unique because our data protection certifications, we have 3, they are administered by IMDA, by a government agency. So this gives the certifications a robust reputation, right? When you think of Singapore government, you think of efficiency, right? Low corruption, I wouldn't say no corruption, right? Rule of law and all that. So naturally, it gives our certifications, specifically the IMDA Data Protection Trustmark, a good reputation boost, right? So in Singapore, currently we have 3 certifications. So we have the first of all, the Data Protection Trustmark, which is a domestic certification. This was designed based on the PDPA as well as international benchmarks and best practices. So we took in what we think makes sense, data protection laws from Australia, from Hong Kong, as well as the EU GDPR. Okay, elements, not everything, right? To develop this data protection trustmark. And it is designed for organizations to use it as a visible badge that they have accountable and responsible data protection practices. Okay, we launched this in 2019, so relatively young. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary, by the way. Just a note, if you were to go to YouTube, you will search for Trustmark, Data Protection Trustmark, you can watch our latest industry video where we feature some of our certified companies. This is fresh out of the oven, not too long ago. So just a shout out. Okay, so that's a Data Protection Trustmark. And then we have the other 2 certifications. These are designed by APAC. So this is not made in Singapore. However, for IMDA, we took on the role of what we call an accountability agent that has been authorized by the APAC, JOP, this Joint Oversight. What's the last P? Joint Oversight Partner. Okay. Yeah, but basically the APAC authorities, they authorized IMDA as accountability agent to administer these 2 certifications in Singapore. Okay, so what are the difference? APAC cross-border privacy rules, they're designed for data controllers. So if you're responsible for the handling, the collection of personal data, you'll be considered a data controller. For PRP, privacy recognition for processors, this certification system is designed for data intermediaries. Okay, they use the word data processors, which is a more commonly used term in the GDPR, for example. But in Singapore, we call it the data intermediaries, right? So these 2 APAC certifications, they are designed based on the APAC privacy framework. Okay, so this is the 3 different certifications, right? So Data Protection Trustmark made in Singapore, APAC, CBPR, PRP, we are administering on behalf of APAC, right? So in terms of the difference, I think we can talk about the difference, right? Chuan Heng, since I'm on this page, right? So the next question people would ask me, what would be the difference between these 3 certifications? Okay, so these 3 certifications, fundamentally, they do serve different purposes. Okay, first and foremost, for the Data Protection Trustmark, it is a domestic certification. What it does is, because it is aligned to the PDPA, it was designed based on the PDPA, it would allow organizations, certified organizations, to demonstrate that they are in compliance with the PDPA. Okay, a lot of times a lot of organizations that I talk to, they do get questions from their potential business partners and other customers asking, do you have any evidence that you comply with the PDPA, for example? Okay, so what are the privacy standards and all that? And a lot of times, most of the time, the answer will be, oh, we conduct audits. This is our audit report, for example. But we designed the Trustmark to be used in such a way that if you get such questions, all you need to do is show them that you are certified with the Data Protection Trustmark, and that will be a very clear demonstration of a compliance with the PDPA. Okay. This is different from the CBPR, PRP. As I mentioned, they are designed based on the APAC privacy framework, right? Okay. So when it comes to the assessment itself, For the Data Protection Trustmark, it is an enterprise-wide certification, meaning that the assessors will look at the entire organization's data protection policies, processes, and practices. Okay, unlike other certifications where there's a specific scoping in the systems, this Data Protection Trustmark is enterprise-wide. We look at all the processes involved in the collection, use, and the disclosure of personal data and storage of personal data. Okay, for CBPR, PRP, this is where it differs. There is a specific scoping done. So if an organization goes for CBPR, they will need to highlight what data that they have that is being used for the cross-border transfer, that is used in cross-border transfer. They need to identify that specific data to undergo the CBPR assessment. Okay, so give an example. The most common personal data identified that's been used for cross-border transfer will be customers' data, right? Your Singapore subsidiary, Singapore company sends to another entity overseas, either a subsidiary or a third party, right? So you need to identify that, yes, I'm going to go through a certification with the scope of my customers' data and the policies and the systems surrounding the transfer of that particular personal data will be involved in the assessment. Okay. The next difference, Data Protection Trustmark is valid for 3 years. It's a 3-year certification, no annual audit requirements, no annual subscription or membership fee involved. Okay, 3 years. Once you get certified, it is 3 years. For CBPR, PRP, it is valid for 1 year. Okay, this is something that has been decided by the APAC. So again, some may say that 1 year may not be ideal. We acknowledge that, and you have given our feedback, and we are actively talking to APAC on this matter. Okay, the last difference, Trustmark, the Data Protection Trustmark certification, it is a certification based on a unique legal entity. Okay, in short, one UEN number, one certification. Okay, a lot of people ask me these questions because they don't really understand the concept of a unique legal entity. So I make it very simple. One UEN, one certification. If you have a lot of subsidiaries under you, it doesn't matter. Okay, most of the time they should be a separate UEN, right? So unfortunately, if you have multiple subsidiaries under you, all these subsidiaries interested go for Trustmark, they would have to each go for individual certification themselves, okay, application itself. Okay. However, this is where the APEC CBPR PRP is advantageous. They can bring in subsidiaries or affiliate as part of the certification, meaning if Singapore, your company is the regional HQ, for example, and you have subsidiaries in Malaysia, Indonesia, these subsidiaries can be involved in this certification assessment. And as if they go through the certification successfully, these subsidiaries will also be awarded the APEC CBPR or PRP. Right? So these are the key differences between these certifications. Right. So yeah, I think I gave quite a long presentation on this.
That was very informative actually. Personally, what I found has been very useful with some of our partners and people ask us the questions is I'll put a link there into the chat. Under DPTM in the IMDA website, there's actually a pretty useful DPTM certification checklist.
Yep.
It provides references to other guides that IMDA has actually published around specific areas of the requirements. So for the smaller businesses, I think this actually provides quite a handy way.
Yeah.
The guides are not legal compliance facing. So any layman can read, get an understanding of what IMDA is getting at. So I think that's very useful, at least for myself. So thanks for the good summary there. Now that we are on the topic of DPTM certification, the local one around Singapore, perhaps you could help us a little bit on understanding the common misconceptions that SMEs might have around privacy compliance. Just now, you also did highlight a little bit around the perception and the challenges SMEs might face, especially given limited resources and having this, when they deal with a lot of PAI, this might be something that's very, very large and they might not know where to begin. Right?
Yeah, I think the challenge for many SMEs, fundamentally, right, I shared before, the fact that they have limited resources. So actually, a lot of things fall back to the boss, especially in a small business. And one of, if we multitask a lot, right, we do a lot of things. One of the biggest challenge as a person who handles a lot of things would be context switching, right? And as you do more and more stuff, the context switching effort becomes harder. So the SMEs in the world and in the realm where there are quite a few compliance issues that they have to deal with, from manpower issues to industry specific ones like FMB or BCA and other regulations, and then towards maybe they may be in the middle of a grant application, and then there's privacy, right? They have to in their head kind of prioritize what they need to remember, and the rest naturally they'll kind of forget it, right? So the biggest challenge about schemes and new structures like this is really a way in which someone who have forgotten what it was is able to quickly educate and update themselves to a point where they can, hey, okay, this is where I am. Let's proceed from here onwards. I think that's one of those challenge. And the lack of adoption really is that a SME never, in most cases, right, lack of adoption in certain standards or certain audit recommendations or rules or even MOM guidelines commonly, right, is really that they never get past that 15 minutes that's needed, right, to get past the initial understanding of what does this mean to my business, and then what do I actually take on as a next step. So I think from an understanding perspective, I think in its um, in its ecosystem, right, within data protection, I can see the value of the trust protection as well as alignment to APAC. I think it's actually great because I can see from broader perspective, Singapore trying to taking the initiatives to build a regional, pretty much allowing Singapore to become the next generation hub, moving from the old entrepreneur chop pot, right, where shipping, to the digital entrepot, right? And we have been signing a digital collaboration with UK and I think a few countries, and having our privacy standards elevated to that of being aligned with APAC. I think it's a very great move. So if SMEs can see that and see what's the maybe 2-3 basic things that we do, and always we look at it from perspective, okay, if I do this, am I going to get more revenue, right? Very simple, right? I got to be honest, right? We're not doing that for for others, but we got to make profit to allow the business to sustain. So they'll be looking at, am I going to be able to have better revenues, better customers, access more customers if I do ABC? And I think if IMDA, we could look at like, hey, if SMEs are on this platform, what does it mean for the platform, access to maybe new potential markets? I think that would be interesting for SMEs to look at, and they will be really interested to say, if I've got the Trustmark, I've now be able to access a certain market, not just from a conceptual point of view, but we give them some direct lead in, right? I think that would be something that would pique the interest of an SME to continue to take further action. They see one line of action, right? The other part is really, if it's really for hygiene purposes, tell me what are the 3 basic things we should do, and then get ourselves aligned. And if government procurement, I think Dom, you're saying that procurement has a basic requirement, we can do that education. And as association, SME will be happy, and we would love to kind of partner with you guys, right, Dom, to look at how we can simplify it so that it becomes more bite-sized for the SME to actually take the next step and educate them easily. So we can do the translation and we wouldn't call it dumbing down, but simplifying it so that it's a 5-minute, take it and run, kind of thing.
Thanks, Yurit. I echo some of your thoughts on this, and thanks for offering for to work together, the SB. Actually, this is something that we've been looking at as well. And then especially again after the COS, you will hear some announcements that would be particularly helpful to SMEs. And again, as SP, you guys are as the name suggests, right? You are the premium SME association. Naturally, you guys would be the go-to in terms of reaching out to the SMEs to communicate to them. And what would be proposed, or rather what will be announced, I won't go into the full details, but I'll just give you a bit of a teaser. We want to find ways to help SMEs put in place basic data protection practices at a very cost-effective manner. Okay, and that is something that we are looking at, because data protection trustmark, I'll be very frank with everyone here, the data protection trustmark certification is not a walk in the park. It is not something that I go to the market, buy off the shelf, go home, install, and I'm done. It's not that simple, right? Chen Heng mentioned just now that we do publish a certification checklist online. That is not the full exam questions. Okay, I must emphasize this. It is basically a preview of what you can expect from a Trustmark assessment, right? So the idea of the checklist is designed as a litmus test for organizations, right? Some organizations are okay. We thank goodness we don't have a lot of such organizations, but there are some organizations who are completely oblivious to their compliance level. So they think that they are in compliance, they think that they have everything in place, right? And then when they go for the Trustmark certification, they realize that it's not that simple, right? And it is a very painful process for them. So what we did was we designed this checklist, a very simple checklist for organizations to assess their readiness level for the Trustmark certification, right? So in the checklist, it will contain elements that will be looked at, that will be assessed in the Trustmark assessment. And these are the key things that you should have, right? So for example, do you conduct risk assessments, right? This is fundamental, right, in terms of compliance and protecting organization systems, processes, whatever, risk assessment. And then do you have a data breach management plan, right? Because when things happen, when you encounter a data breach, I can tell you 99% of the time from experience, it should not be a reactive response, right? It will not happen. You think that, okay, if it happens, then we deal with it. Trust me, you'll be lost in the chaos of the data breach. So it always helps to have a data breach management plan. So these are the things that we will ask in the checklist. Do you have this? You have this. And organizations, if you can go through the checklist and you think, yes, I have all this, then I would say that I'm confident that you can go for the Trustmark certification. Yeah. So akan datang, we will talk more again on this. Yeah. So happy to continue the conversation after this.
Yeah. I think Dom, along that conversation, you also did highlight some of the common misconceptions and challenges that the applicants might have.
Yep.
Are there any more challenges or problems or issues that you think would be that people would like to take note of?
Okay, I wouldn't say problems. I would say that yes, there could be some challenges. Okay. First and foremost, like with all certifications, organizations should have a better understanding of what it entails. What are the commitment level? What is the commitment level? Of course, there is cost and funding. There's cost, but we kind of like address the issue through funding that has been administered by Enterprise Singapore's Enterprise Development Grant. Right, so companies are interested to apply, and if they think that funding is a big issue if they think that cost is a big issue, the funding is available. They can tap on it. Right, our challenges then, other than the money, would of course be your resources, manpower, especially for SMEs. Sometimes manpower is an issue, like what you mentioned. You can wear a lot of hats, right? To the point that you don't know what hat you're wearing sometimes. Right? So these are real problems on the ground by SMEs. And commitment. A certification, this is not a 1-2 week event. Okay, a typical Trustmark certification takes somewhere between 6 to 9 months. Okay, don't worry, when we say 6 to 9 months, the auditors will not be sitting beside you for that 6 to 9 months. Okay, that doesn't happen, right? The actual assessment itself shouldn't take more than 2 months. But the beauty of the certification, that while yes, it sounds long, right? 6 to 9 months, it sounds long. The reason for that is because during the assessment, the assessment bodies, we call them the assessment bodies, when they identify any issues in your data protection policies or practices, they will highlight to you So it's not an immediate failure. Don't worry. That's why I don't like to use the word audit here, because audit is pass or fail, right? And sometimes they don't even tell the organization. But for us, we take a more, we are assessing what's the standard, what are the gaps, and to point out to the organization. And then we will tell the organizations, okay, these are some ways you can patch up the gaps, some industry practices, best practices that you can adopt to improve yourself. And then we will give the organization some time to remediate. Right, so this is the most beneficial part of the Trustmark certification. Right, so yeah, there's challenges in resources, manpower, time. Yeah, those are the usually the big challenges. Yeah, but I thought that this will also be a good opportunity to highlight the benefits. Do you think it's okay to talk about the benefits now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So for Trustmark benefits, so why would an organization, why would an SME go through the pain of a certification, right? Who in the right mind will do that? So if there are no benefits, right? So benefits for data protection Trustmark. First and foremost, as mentioned, this is not an audit. We are here to help organizations. That is our objective. We are not here to test and assess the compliance level or the data protection level. We are here to help organizations, right, to beef up their standards, or identify gaps. So that's first. It provides assurance to the company based on a set of requirements that were jointly developed together with the regulators. So IMDA, we set the PDPC down, and then we went through discuss, okay, what are the requirements that a company to meet in order to comply with the PDPA. Then we came out with this laundry list of requirements. And if organization were to go through that, then yes, we are very confident that they have sound data protection practices. Right? And as mentioned, if there are any gaps, any non-compliance identified, all this will be highlighted to the organization. IMDA or the PDPC will not be notified. Okay, I must stress this point. There is a very clear China wall here. No, the regulators will not know if assessors uncover some dirty laundry in your policies or whatever. So don't worry, there's a strict confidentiality here, right? And then you will be given a chance to patch up. So that is really a very helpful benefit. The second benefit is it increases competitive advantage. This is really to address what you pointed out, that for SMEs, the value proposition. In fact, maybe not so much in Singapore, but we do have a lot of certified organizations telling me, the good news that they have secured contracts with MNCs, right, around the world. Yeah, okay, MNCs around the world. Yeah, so big corporations, right? We have a few SMEs that secured contracts with big names like Google, Disney, and these are small SMEs, by the way. And then they told us that, they secured the contract because the other party noticed that we are Trustmark certified, right? And because of that, it gives them a bit more assurance. This is very interesting, by the way, because data protection Trustmark, it is not officially recognized around the world yet. Okay, yet, right? This is still a domestic certification. However, there are very few certifications like this around the world. And adopting a certification is a very clear demonstration of accountability. And that's the reason why it has given them the competitive advantage. The third benefit, this is very important, it provides regulatory relief to certified organizations. What do I mean by that? If you are Trustmark certified, you encounter a data breach. What happens is this. You may request from the PDPC an undertaking. Right? So for those who understand the term undertaking, basically means that, okay, I promise to carry out certain action. Okay, and if I can do it properly within a given time frame, there will be no further investigation by the regulators. So that's an undertaking, which means if the undertaking is given, you need to carry out your breach management plan properly. And if done successfully, then no investigation. No investigation usually would mean that there will be no financial penalties, no warnings, etc., etc. So this is one of the biggest benefit for the data protection Trustmark in terms of giving companies the assurance that they are able to show the regulators that they're in good shape. However, I must caveat here, this is not a get out of jail free card. Okay, doesn't mean that whatever data breach you encounter here, you just flash your certificate and you're out of trouble. It doesn't happen that way, okay? Because there may be certain circumstances or data breaches that may warrant an investigation by the PDPC. They don't rule that out, right? But in general, yes, having a Trustmark would be a very strong mitigating factor to the organization in the event of a data breach.
Okay. Well, I think we have spoken at length about the DPTM, and then keeping in mind the time, let's expand a bit. No, it's all right. I think that was very helpful, but let's expand a little bit from DPTM, also how DPTM relates to organizations looking to expand out of Singapore, because the core tenets of what DPTM is asking for actually runs quite similar to what other standards in the region are asking for. As also looking, so I think we'll address the questions in the Q&A section right after this, since we're quite close to that point already. But Sage just raised a good point around maturity and aligning SMEs data protection and the policies around retention, disclosure, data breach, etc. So there's a good point within this statement around how the relationship is between privacy as well as security, where you can't have privacy or data protection without security. And because of the uplift needed, right, on that underlying security requirement, that there's this additional items that are not technically part of data protection or privacy, but out of general security requirements that are also needed to be built in there. So keeping all this in mind, let's talk a little bit about how DPTM and the Singapore regulations can actually help these companies expand outside of Singapore. How is it relevant to other standards we see out there? Especially the big GDPR, right, which actually comes out automatically when we talk about the data protection as well as privacy. So perhaps to kick this off, maybe we can go, Dominic, while you're still on the topic, right? Perhaps you would like to talk a little bit around how DPTM helps companies cope with the current changing landscape, and what kind of agility is expected out of companies in terms of their policies, processes, and practices. Although I know that's a bit of a subjective question, it's going to be a bit hard to address.
Yeah, I would do my best to address this question, also bearing in mind the time. When it comes to the Trustmark and global privacy trends, okay, the Data Protection Trustmark, we are domestic certification, no doubt about that, as mentioned earlier on. However, having a Data Protection Trustmark gives you a good foundation, okay, in meeting other countries' regulatory, let's say, privacy laws, right? So a very common question that I get asked is, if I have the Trustmark certification, would I comply with GDPR? This is a very common question. The answer to that is no, you don't. You won't automatically comply with the GDPR, because while yes, we took in elements of the GDPR, we didn't take in everything. So you will notice that the right to erasure is clearly not inside our Trustmark, and it's not inside our PDPA. However, it gives you a good base to start with. Right? So a lot of organizations, I tell them that if you're working towards GDPR and you're based in Singapore, go for the Trustmark first. Get your foundations right. And then it will not be so challenging. The delta between Trustmark certification and meeting a GDPR compliance, the delta will be significantly reduced. Right, and having a Trustmark will also, I mean, bringing besides the benefits, yeah, it will give you an idea of where you need to head towards. And then it's easy to then add in all the GDPR components. And therefore, having said that, it's not just GDPR, but all the different privacy laws. For example, the Japanese APPI, similar approach. Doesn't mean that you have the Trustmark, you comply with the law, but actually we are quite close in terms of the structure, the DNA. So having a Trustmark would help you make your life easier in terms of meeting these laws, and to allow you to then access these overseas markets. So give overseas regulators, business partners a little bit more assurance that you're in good shape. And I speak likewise for the APEX CBPR as well. Similar thing.
Yeah, maybe I'll add on a bit. I think I had quite a few conversations with clients. They are operating in Singapore, but they are asking, should I just go for GDPR, since it's perhaps one of the strictest standards? If I fulfill GDPR, maybe I'll meet all my requirements. And I think the answer to that really is there needs to be a thought process. For example, being fully compliant to GDPR, but if your business operations, you're not really going to be dealing a lot with the EU customers, you have to take into account the cost also, because there are a lot of additional costs, and privacy is not going to be cheap to be fully compliant. And then again, there is organizations that really are going out internationally. They have many laws to actually keep track to, and it might not be very practical for them to have individual policies or individual practices for each jurisdiction.
Yep.
So how we actually think about this is there needs to be a certain framework, and of course the conversations today sets up some kind of framework, or there can be other frameworks like ISO 27701. And this framework actually will help companies to identify some of the commonalities between the different regulations. For these commonalities, it will be possible to do some kind of lift, shift, and drop so that you really can have that standardized, consistent approach. You can enjoy that economies of scale. And then for the rest, the different country managers or legal team will have to identify the different nuances, the very specific requirements. And then with that baseline commonality, you just add on there. So that is how we usually advise clients. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a sound approach. On my end, we usually have conversations with clients around rationalizing the standards, especially if you're talking across, say, Indonesia and across other commitments such as your ISO 9001, quality control 27001 in terms of information management systems. There's actually a lot of common points. I think you have noticed Dom mentioned early on around doing a risk assessment. That's key part in plan to check X cycle, which is also what a lot of these standards are based on. So if you think from a larger perspective, the specific controls, the specific requirements are different. The overarching system is, or the overarching intent is actually quite similar. So it's actually it's just a approach of setting up the initial system, setting up the commitment to keep to that system, and then you can add in these individual items, individual controls for all these standards. Yeah, so before we move into Q&A section, maybe there's one last thing that always comes up in any of these conversations around what kind of relevant resources there are in terms of grants, in terms of additional assistance that companies have access to, especially on the SME side, which tends to need the assistance or this additional resources. So perhaps do you have anything you'd like to add on that point?
I think that the questions raised so far it's really quite good, and if you look at the chat, right, I think someone, Sergey or Christians, was asking very relevant question that typical SME would ask, like how much would it cost to do DPTM certification, and what other templates. And these are very logical first steps to look at. And I think it will really help SMEs to kind of begin the journey fast.
I guess with that, perhaps let's move into the Q&A section then, because we'll be addressing those questions anyway, right? So I'll just open the question to the panel as a whole. Maybe let's address Sergey's one first. While maturing and allowing SMEs data protection, they need to develop other policies in terms of retention, disclosure, data breach, and so on. So of course, the question is around any templates or references they can use to start this data protection policies and the associated other guidelines and procedures they might need to have. And also a small question around the cost of a small SME to get DPT certified. I guess this might also be a good time to touch a little on the EDG grant, although that the current run of the grant will actually end in March, and then I assume there'll be some kind of relook or refresh at it. And yeah, let's take it off from there. So open to everyone at the panel who would like to address this first.
Maybe let me address the grant issue first before I forget. The Enterprise Development Grant will support organizations. It doesn't have to be SMEs, by the way, right? So the EDG can support any organization as long as you're eligible. But of course, what I understand is if you're SME, the support quantum is higher, right? But for eligibility criteria, if I remember correctly, it's you need to be at least 30% local shareholding. You must be in a financially capable position to complete the project. Right? I think these are the two key criteria for any organization applying for the Trustmark. And as of now, what Chen Heng you mentioned is that till 31st March, the max quantum is at 80%. Okay, we were hoping that after budget they will make an announcement, because previously that's what they did, right? So budget, they said, oh, we will keep the 80% because of COVID. But I understand that it will revert back to its original 70% cap. So bottom line is the grant will still continue. Don't worry, there will still be grant available. However, if you apply for the grant after 31st March, it will return back to 70% from the temporary increase of 80%. So wow, you still have 1 month. I mean, if organization interested, you can go for it now. Yeah. In terms of the developing the policies, I think one thing I need to highlight is that SMEs are actually very close to our hearts, because we understand that for SMEs it will really be challenging, and 99% of businesses are SMEs, right? I mean, that's my understanding of the statistics, and therefore there is this pool of people that we really need to help in terms of leveling up the data protection capabilities. And yes, not so much of IMDA, but PDPC has actually developed policies, templates for use, and these are all free. There are available guides on the PDPC website that SMEs can refer to. Just need to spend some effort and time to just go through. Yes, I know that some of the documents can have a lot of legal jargon, but it's becoming better. Frankly speaking, I think PDPC has designed the guides, has improved the guides to be a little bit more readable nowadays. So that's good news. Yeah. So my advice is for SMEs, don't be too afraid to take the first step. There's a Chinese saying, right? A journey of million miles begin with first step, right? We begin with 1 step. So that is something that we always encourage SMEs. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't be afraid. Take the first step. There are a lot of resources available. A lot of free templates an organization can use. Even addressing things like retention, disposal, and how do you respond in the event of a data breach. All the templates are there. All the resources are there. You just need to spend some time and effort to go through them to get a better understanding.
I have a quick question for Dom.
Yes.
When we talk about EDG grant, means that
Yes.
then this DTM thing is not a small initiative, because for EDG grant, that means we are talking about a decent quantum of 20K upwards, maybe 15 at least, right? And then of which 30 to 80, 20 to 30% the SME will have to pay to go through this. So it's quite a sizable initiative for a typical SME to go for DTM.
Okay, there are 2 fees involved. Just to address the question, there are 2 fees involved for a Trustmark certification. This is similar to the CBPR. We have intentionally aligned them to be similar. There are 2 fees involved. First and foremost, there's an application fee, $535. This is payable to IMDA, right? This is you can't claim this. This is something that you can't claim under EDG. Okay, so I must highlight first. It's not a small amount. I acknowledge for SMEs, right? I will have to acknowledge that. Okay. The second fee will be the assessment fee. This is the one that is a little bit more big ticket item. Okay, the assessment fee depends on a lot of factors. First and foremost, it depends on the assessment body of your choice, right? Because each assessment bodies, while we do have some internal controls, they may offer different pricing, okay, all in the name of competition, meaning that they try to lower their cost as much as possible versus other AVs possible, okay? So it depends on how you negotiate and how you talk to the AVs. The second factor will be the size of the organization. Typically, we measure the size of an organization based on annual revenue, size of company in terms of staff strength, and the amount of personal data held by the organization. But just to give you an idea, for a typical SME on average, what we have seen, the assessment fee would range somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000. Okay, so 5,000 to 6,000. That's for the assessment fee. Okay, we have seen cases where it went below 5K. Of course, we have seen cases where it went beyond 6K. Okay, again, taking into consideration the different factors, but largely around 5 to 6 for typical SME. However, there is of course the other component, which is the consultancy. Okay, so if you go for the EDG grant, right, the EDG grant will cover the assessment fee. So let's say typical SME, your assessment fee is 60%. The EDG will cover 70%, 80%, right? So there's out-of-pocket expense of 20, 30% by the SME, which is still a manageable amount. But however, then comes the consultancy fee. Okay, so objectively speaking, it is not mandatory to go for consultancy, but usually I advise SMEs if they're not sure. We have certified a total of about 78 organizations as of today. I think we will increase the number to 81 by end of today. Just wait for the news. 78 certified organizations. About 20 to 30% of them did not engage a consultant. They went through a certification. Of course, these are some of the big banks, the insurers, but we do have a few SMEs that actually underwent the certification with no consultancy help. Okay, because it depends on how ready the SME is. If the SME is very sure of themselves, they are very confident in compliance, then you don't need the consultancy, right? But majority, we do advise, if you're not sure, do seek consultancy help because it is covered under the grant. Same thing, 70 to 80% of the consultancy fee. I won't comment on the consultancy fee here because the issue here is the range is very extreme. I've seen very, very, very low and I've seen very, very, very high. So I can't really give an average here, okay? And I also don't want to set a false expectation. SME said, hey, at this event, Dom said that it's X amount, but how come you're charging me twice the amount? Okay, it depends a lot on readiness. Why? You're not ready? The consultant needs to spend more effort, more man days with you, and that will drive up the cost. Simply put it that way. Yeah, we've seen it. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's the portion.
I was going to agree with you, Dom. I mean, we have worked with, I mean, myself and Navin, we have worked with some SMEs. Do you see extremes on the other end, on both ends? There are some companies that really are starting from scratch.
Correct.
You might find file servers with customers' data from 5 years ago still sitting somewhere in the corner, and anyone can access. So from a security baseline point of view, there might be a lot you need to work on. And in some cases, things like data mapping might be particularly challenging if it's, say, a technology company dealing with a large amount of analytics.
Yes.
Then in that case, the cost would vary greatly. And I like your approach of saying, because of this large variance, it's really, really hard to promise that we'll keep it within a certain range. It's just not possible. We have some SMEs who even went out of their way to go to the UK ICO website under GDPR, which actually has some templates there that are a bit of overkill for DPTM, but they've gone ahead and used those as templates and have to a degree successfully implemented that, which means to Singapore standards, they actually have completed a large portion on their own. So there really is a large range. It depends on who you have with your team, right? Navin, would you like to expand a bit? I mean, given what you've seen in the industry.
I guess the thing about templates and policies, I think great point mentioned earlier. But what we observe sometimes the challenges are that it is easy to get a whole suite of policies, but in terms of implementing the policy itself, that is the challenge where companies might face. For example, data inventory map templates out there from PDPC, very comprehensive, very detailed. But the challenges some businesses face will be, are you able to identify all your various processes? Sometimes companies might be too focused on their core processes, their customers' data, and then they also forget about the internal, I need to protect my employee data. That's an example of how templates might not be used to its full effect. Yeah, so there are two parts. One, the templates and policies. It will be very good to have them, definitely. But then the second step into implementing that. And then of course, if we talk about data protection policies, there's one very important aspect that we have not really covered, which is security policies. And if you look at the PDPC enforcement page, you will realize that most of the enforcement action, there will be a component of protection there, whereby there's some lapses in protection. And that's where a suite of information security policies that is implemented is also very important. If you actually just take a read over a few of these cases, you will PDPC will actually place some consideration or mitigating factors where we have these various policies, practices in place from both data protection and security point of view. Yeah, so it's actually very, very broad. It's not just a few data protection policies, but it's going to be a very comprehensive effort if we want to do this right. Yeah.
Just to add on one point, when it comes to investigative action, okay, again, I don't speak on behalf of the PDPC, but based on experience, please, my advice to all those listening here, okay, this is for you folks out there behind the screen. If you have not appointed a DPO today, please appoint one now, okay?
Yeah.
Because if you were to ever get into trouble with the law, not having a DPO is a very big no-no. Okay, because by law you need to appoint a data protection officer, and the DPO doesn't have to be certified experience, have long titles, CIPP, ACIPM, whatever. You don't have to. Somebody who you think can do the job should be appointed. And a lot of companies, small companies, especially for SMEs, the director tends to be a DPO, right? And it has some advantage because the director is the decision maker and they can decide immediately if something happens, what to do next. So there are some benefits on that. And so please, if you have not appointed a DPO, please appoint a DPO. Send a letter or email to one of your friendly colleagues and tell them, oh, you've been appointed a DPO for the company. Yeah, trust me, don't worry, trust me. This will really, this is a very good first step. And what Navin pointed out is it takes a lot of effort to have a comprehensive policy in place. But again, start somewhere. Right, if you're a small SME, okay, this is a true story. One of our Trustmark certified company was a micro SME, right? Two-man team, and it's funny because it's a husband and wife team, right? So two men, right? So it falls under the definition of micro SME. They have a data protection policy of, if I remember correctly, 4 pages. 4 pages. We accepted it because it addresses the organization's data protection requirements. Specifically for the organization, they were a very small tech company, so it addresses that. Okay, so when we evaluate a company, an SME, it will consummate with the size of the organization. Okay, the standards are the same, the requirements and the approach are the same robustness. However, we will take into consideration your small SME, not very complex business process, 1 or 2 main business process, that will be taken into consideration on the amount of effort needed, the cost as well for the assessment. But of course, versus a bank, if a bank tells me that I only got 4 pages in my data protection policies, it's an immediate failure, right? So simple as that. Yeah. So we that's my advice for especially SMEs as well.
Yeah,
I want
to say, Dom, great advice, and I think these are the kind of little, on ground advice that SMEs love to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will walk away with some takeaways. Please appoint a DPO, and how you guys make policy and assessment, right? I think that's very insightful. Great, thanks for sharing that.
Doesn't have to be legal, flowery legal language. Your policy.
Yeah,
it don't have to be
simple languages.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, just use the templates, make it simple to understand. It works.
I think end of the day, what everyone's trying to do here is to use a risk-based approach, right? To the degree of risk as a SME, what PII, what kind of data you hold, then there's an appropriate level of mitigation you need to do. And I guess like Dom mentioned, we are not trying to turn every SME into the bank, right?
Yeah.
We're not citing like a 100-page legally worded policy from
yeah.
Yeah. Right. Keeping in mind, we overran time a little by 10 minutes, but I think it was a very good conversation there, so I didn't want to end it either. But maybe now we can have a minute or two for some closing remarks before we close off for the day. And to the audience, if you have any more questions, feel free to send it along to the email in the invite. We can then forward it along to Dom, and you'll be able to help out also. And before I hand it off, thanks everyone, Dom, Navin, and Yue for taking the time today to have this session around data privacy. So any closing remarks from the panel?
I just want to say that I think this has been a very beneficial session. I've learned also a lot from you, from the SME's point of view, and all that has been very, very helpful, very insightful as well. And rest assured that these are things that we take into consideration. We take it seriously. These are things because we want to really help the SMEs especially.
Thanks, Dom. I just wanted to say great to have you share these perspectives, and I think that the perspective of SME is very well understood from Dom's perspective, and I think we'd love to continue taking this conversation further and see how we can actually impact the ground in baby steps, a journey of 1,000 miles, right?
Yeah, 1,000 miles.
First 3 to 5 steps.
Yeah, I used the term correctly, right? I was thinking, did I just use it wrongly?
Yeah. Thank you both. I think it was a really insightful session, and really there were a lot of practical tips and advice from the ground in terms of how to deal with the data privacy. And maybe the final word is do start to prioritize data privacy. Do not take it for granted. Even if your core processes do not involve personal data, the PDPA is going to be mandatory for all. So this is something that really we need to really enforce within the organization. And it's really any scale, SME, MNCs, all will have a part to play for this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess those are good points, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us for today for a bit of extended session. I hope it was helpful for everyone. And last reminder, feel free to send in the queries. We can always bring Dom and Hewitt and all of us together through an email and answer you via that channel. But for now, have a good rest of the week and have a good day ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.